I'm going to start with the exact moment everything split in two, because that was when I understood just how expendable I was to the people who swore they loved me. Monday morning, 10:47 a.m. I remember the time because the digital clock on the conference room wall was the last thing I saw before my body staged a full rebellion in front of my boss and half the marketing department. 1 second, I was clicking through slide 17 of Q3 revenue optimization strategies. The next, my chest felt like someone had shoved a fist inside my rib cage and squeezed. Hard. My lungs locked up, as if a python had wrapped itself around them, and the room tilted violently to the left. "Are you okay?" someone asked. "Accounting, I think." He sounded more annoyed than concerned. I tried to answer, tried to laugh it off, like maybe it was just stress or caffeine, but my voice came out wrong. A thin wheeze. Embarrassing. Weak. Then the ugly beige carpet we'd been complaining about for 3 years rushed up to meet my face. Lights out. When I woke up, everything was white and buzzing. Hospital white. The kind of fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look like they belong in a zombie movie. My chest felt crushed. Wires ran from my body in every direction. A nurse with kind eyes smiled down at me. "Welcome back, Marissa. You gave us quite a scare." A scare. I'd had a heart attack at 34. Dr. Martinez explained it calmly, clinically, like he was describing a delayed flight. Then he said the sentence that should have changed everything. "We've contacted your emergency contact, your husband, Daniel Martinez. He should be here soon." Should be. Those words hung in the air like spoiled milk. Because Daniel wasn't there. Not that night, not the next morning, not the day after that. While machines beeped beside my bed, keeping track of a heart that had nearly given up, my husband, the man who promised in sickness and in health, was nowhere to be found. By day 3, the nurses stopped asking if someone was coming. Other patients had flowers, visitors, laughter. I had daytime game shows and a vending machine down the hall. Then my phone finally lit up. For half a second, hope fluttered weakly in my chest. But it wasn't Daniel. It was Instagram. And what I saw on that screen would hurt me more deeply than the heart attack ever did. Because that was the moment I realized I wasn't a wife. I was replaceable. Before my heart failed me, I would have told you my life was ordinary, stable, predictable in the way people mistake for happiness. My name is Marissa Thompson. I was 34 years old, a senior marketing strategist at a mid-size firm downtown, the kind of job that looked impressive on LinkedIn and quietly drained your soul in real life. I was good at it, too good, according to my boss, because I had a habit of fixing problems that weren't technically mine. Campaign falling apart? I stayed late. Client unhappy? I smoothed it over. Team behind schedule? I absorbed the pressure and made it disappear. That trait didn't come from nowhere. I learned early that being useful was the fastest way to be valued. I met Daniel Martinez 8 years earlier at a friend's birthday party. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He was charming in a calm, reassuring way, soft-spoken, attentive, the kind of man who made you feel seen simply by listening. He worked in logistics management back then, steady income, practical goals. He told me he admired how driven I was. I told myself that meant partnership. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. He bought the ring himself. Classic, modest, diamond just big enough to feel intentional. When he got down on one knee, his hands were shaking. I remember thinking, this is a good man, a safe man. I said yes without hesitation. The first year of marriage felt fine. Not fireworks, not despair, just fine. Daniel liked routines, Sunday dinners, family gatherings, traditions. His parents, William and Patricia Martinez, lived 2 hours north near Crystal Lake. They welcomed me politely, never warmly, never cruelly. I was Daniel's wife, nothing more, nothing less. Then there was Ashley, Daniel's younger sister. Ashley was everything I wasn't. Loud, performative, always chasing the next big idea. 1 month it was handmade jewelry, the next an online boutique, then influencer content. She talked constantly about building her brand while somehow never paying rent on time. I didn't mind at first. When Daniel asked if I could help Ashley just temporarily, I said yes. That word, temporary, would follow me for years. A cosign here, a shared account there, covering a bill because family helps family. Daniel framed it like teamwork, like loyalty. I framed it as love. The warning signs were subtle. Daniel stopped asking before decisions were made. His parents assumed instead of requested. Ashley treated my finances like a safety net she could fall into without warning me first. And me? I absorbed it. I told myself it was marriage, compromise, support. I ignored the way Daniel never knew my doctor's name, ignored the way he didn't notice my exhaustion, ignored the fact that when I mentioned chest tightness weeks before my collapse, he'd said, "You worry too much, it's just stress." I ignored how his family spoke about me instead of to me, how I was useful but invisible, reliable but replaceable. By the time my heart gave out in that conference room, I had already been carrying everyone else for years. I just didn't realize how heavy the load had become, and I definitely didn't realize how quickly they would set it down once I stopped functioning. Looking back, the cracks didn't appear overnight. They spread slowly, thin fractures I kept stepping over because it was easier than stopping to examine them. After our 3rd anniversary, Daniel started changing in small, inconvenient ways. He became distracted when I talked, defensive when I asked questions. If I mentioned money, he sighed like I was accusing him of something. If I brought up his family, he shut down entirely. "They're just stressed," he'd say. "They don't mean it like that." "You're overthinking." Those 3 sentences became the soundtrack of my marriage. Ashley's boutique was the first real warning sign. What started as a short-term cosign quietly turned into automatic withdrawals. 15th of every month. Rent, inventory, emergency expenses. When I noticed, Daniel brushed it off. "She's trying to build something," he said. "Don't you believe in ambition?" I did. I just didn't believe in ambition funded entirely by someone else's exhaustion. Then came his parents. William liked to talk about legacy, about family sticking together, about sacrifices that real adults make. Patricia preferred guilt, subtle, practiced, devastatingly effective. "You don't have children yet," she once said over dinner, smiling gently, "so you don't really understand responsibility." I laughed awkwardly. Daniel said nothing. Another crack. The stress at work intensified. Deadlines stacked. Late nights became normal. I started waking up with my jaw clenched so tightly my temples throbbed. Some mornings, my chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around it and pulled just a little too hard. I mentioned it once while Daniel scrolled on his phone. "You should take a vacation," he said without looking up. "From what? From who?" Family gatherings grew heavier. Conversations stopped when I entered the room. Decisions were announced, not discussed. I'd learn afterward that money had moved, plans had been made, expectations set, always with my name attached. And somehow I was always the last to know. The worst part wasn't the money. It was the absence. When my car broke down, I handled it myself. When I worked through weekends, no one noticed. When my anxiety spiked so badly my hands shook, Daniel told me I needed to relax more. But when Ashley needed something, everyone mobilized. I started feeling like furniture, useful, present, quietly taken for granted. The night before my heart attack, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Daniel slept beside me, breathing evenly. I remember thinking, if something happened to me right now, would anyone notice before the inconvenience set in? That thought scared me. I didn't know then that my body had already decided to answer it. Because the tension I'd been swallowing, the pressure I kept normalizing, had been building towards something inevitable. And while I was ignoring every warning sign, the people around me were getting comfortable with the idea that I would always be there. Always paying, always fixing, always absorbing. Until the day I didn't. By day 3 in the hospital, I'd stopped asking questions out loud. I lay there listening to the machines, steady beeps measuring a heart that had nearly quit on me, while my mind did what it does best in moments of forced stillness. It replayed conversations, rewound memories, looked for proof that I mattered more than a line item on someone else's spreadsheet. That's when my phone buzzed. For half a second, my chest tightened. Not pain this time, but something fragile and hopeful. Maybe Daniel had finally called. Maybe something terrible had happened to him. Maybe there was a reason. People don't just disappear when their spouse nearly dies, right? I reached for the phone. Instagram. Ashley Martinez tagged you in a photo. Ashley, Daniel's sister, the aspiring influencer, the woman who once told me she'd totally Venmo me back 3 years ago. My thumb hovered over the notification. I didn't want to open it. Not really. But curiosity mixed with dread has a way of overpowering common sense. I tapped. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, like my phone was deliberately stretching out the moment it would hurt me. There they were. Ashley, sunlight catching her hair just right, wearing a flowing sundress that probably cost more than my monthly groceries. Daniel stood beside her, my husband, relaxed, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. His arm rested casually around his mother, Patricia, while William stood behind them, all teeth and pride. They looked happy. Not relieved, not worried, happy. The setting was unmistakable. Crystal Lake, 2 hours north of the city, the place Daniel and I had gone for our first anniversary picnic, a red checkered blanket spread across the grass, a wicker basket filled with artisanal sandwiches and drinks that screamed we had time for this. The caption made my vision blur. Family day without the drama. Sometimes you need to surround yourself with people who lift you up. #blessed, #lake life, #drama free. They had tagged me, as if to make sure I saw it. My throat tightened. My fingers trembled so badly I had to set the phone down. Somewhere to my left, a machine beeped faster, reacting to the spike in my heart rate. A nurse peeked in. "You okay, Marissa?" I nodded. I lied. I picked the phone back up. One of Daniel's cousins had commented, "Where's Marissa?" Ashley replied with a laughing, crying emoji. "She's taking time to work on herself. We're supporting her journey." My journey. I stared at those words until they lost meaning. I hadn't chosen this. I hadn't decided to work on myself. I was lying in a hospital bed with wires taped to my chest, learning that my heart had failed because I'd spent years carrying everyone else, and they were having a picnic. Something shifted inside me then. It wasn't explosive, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like a door closing. 4 days into my stay at St. Mary's Hospital, I had learned 2 things with painful clarity. First, my absence didn't disrupt their lives. Second, my presence had only ever mattered for what it provided. That afternoon, while I stared at the ceiling and counted the tiles, my phone erupted. Not 1 call, not 2. 44 missed calls. Daniel, William, Daniel again, William again. A pattern. The calls started around 2 p.m., according to the timestamps. Over and over, desperate, insistent. Then came the text. "We need you. Answer immediately." "No, how are you feeling?" "No, I'm sorry." "No, we were wrong." Just a demand. Like I was customer support. Like my job was to fix something that had suddenly broken. Something important enough to interrupt their picnic-perfect reality. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears, and felt something colder than anger settle into my bones. They hadn't called because they were worried. They called because something they needed was gone. And for the first time since I collapsed, I stopped asking why my husband hadn't shown up. I already knew the answer. I didn't call Daniel back right away. That surprised me. Old me, the version of myself that existed before the hospital, before the wires and the beeping and the brutal clarity, would have panicked. I would have assumed I'd done something wrong. I would have worried about what crisis I'd missed, what fire needed extinguishing, what apology I owed for not being available. But lying there in that hospital bed, staring at 44 missed calls and 1 cold, commanding text, something inside me refused to move. Instead of reacting, I went still. Shock didn't arrive like a scream. It came like fog. My body felt heavy, numb, as if the emotional pain had decided to sit on top of the physical one and wait. I pressed my palm against my chest, feeling the dull ache beneath the bandages, and wondered how long my heart had been screaming before it finally collapsed. What did I miss? What did I excuse? How did I let this become normal? I thought about Daniel's face in that photo, relaxed, unburdened. I thought about the way he hadn't known my allergies, my medications, my family history. I thought about how easily he'd accepted my silence as convenience instead of absence. The nurse with the cat print scrubs came in to check my vitals. She smiled gently, unaware she was walking into the aftermath of something that couldn't be reversed. "You've had a rough few days," she said softly. "But you're doing well. Your numbers are improving." I nodded, swallowing hard. My body was healing. My marriage was not. Later that evening, Dr. Ruiz stopped by. He spoke carefully, deliberately, about lifestyle changes, stress management, boundaries. He said the word boundaries like it was a medical prescription. "You've been under prolonged emotional and physical stress," he said. "That matters. You can't ignore it anymore." I almost laughed. Ignoring things had been my specialty. That night, after the hallway quieted and the lights dimmed, I finally listened to Daniel's voicemail. His voice was irritated before it was concerned. "I don't know what's gotten into you," he said. Cutting off the accounts without talking to me? This isn't how adults handle things, Marissa. You're being selfish. My family is panicking. Not I was scared, not I'm sorry I wasn't there. Just my family. I turned the phone face down and stared into the dark. For the first time, I let myself ask the question I'd been avoiding for years. If I stop fixing things, do I still matter? The answer was unfolding in real time. Sometime past midnight, my thoughts drifted to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Uncle Eddie, my mother's older brother, the quiet one, the man who never asked for help and never made me feel like my worth came with conditions. Daniel had always disliked him, said he was negative, old-fashioned, a bad influence. Visiting Eddie was always inconvenient. Too far, too small, too honest. I scrolled through my contacts with shaking fingers until I found his name. My heart raced, not with fear this time, but with something dangerously close to hope. I pressed call. It rang twice. Hello? My voice broke. Uncle Eddie, it's me. There was a pause on the line, just long enough for me to brace myself for disappointment. Then he said calmly, which hospital? That was it. No accusations, no guilt, no, why haven't you called? Just action. I closed my eyes, tears slipping silently down my temples. St. Mary's, I whispered. I'll be there in an hour, he said, and then softer. Hang on. When he walked into my room, something in my chest loosened for the first time since the attack. He didn't rush me, didn't hover. He looked me in the eyes, really looked, and nodded once, like he was confirming something important. You look like hell, he said. I let out a weak laugh. It hurt. It was honest. He pulled up the plastic chair and sat down as if he had nowhere else to be. And while everyone else in my life had vanished when I stopped being useful, Uncle Eddie stayed. That's when I realized something else. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't dramatic. I was finally reacting appropriately to years of being quietly erased. Uncle Eddie didn't waste time. While I'd spent 4 days lying in a hospital bed wondering why my husband hadn't come, Eddie spent 30 minutes asking the kinds of questions that only someone who genuinely cared would think to ask. What were you feeling before the attack? How long had the chest pain been happening? Any family history of heart disease? He asked calmly, methodically, like he was piecing together a puzzle no one else had bothered to notice. I answered slowly, my voice catching when I mentioned my father, how he'd died of a heart attack at 52. How I'd brushed off the warning signs because everyone else needed me functional, useful, standing. Eddie frowned. Daniel know any of this? I shook my head. He sighed, not angrily, not dramatically, just tired. The kind of sigh that comes from a lifetime of watching people disappoint you in predictable ways. She wouldn't know your medications either, would she? He asked gently. I didn't answer, because the truth was humiliating. Daniel didn't know my allergies, didn't know my medical history, didn't know the stress I'd been carrying. But Eddie did. He'd remembered details from conversations we'd had years ago, paid attention in ways no one else had. And as he spoke with the doctors, asking sharp, informed questions, I watched the staff respond differently. With respect, with seriousness. When Eddie stepped out briefly and returned an hour later, he carried a folder. Insurance paperwork. Your coverage is being difficult, he said carefully. Of course it was. The cardiologist wanted additional tests, important ones, but the insurance company had denied them. Something about insufficient justification. Eddie didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He opened his checkbook and wrote a check. Just like that. I stared at him. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, he said quietly. Someone should. After the nurses left, Eddie pulled out his tablet. Now, he said, let's look at your finances. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I thought I knew where my money went. I earned well. We lived comfortably. Things were tight sometimes, but I'd chalk that up to adulthood, inflation, life. I was wrong. What Eddie showed me felt like watching an autopsy. My financial life laid open, dissected with clinical precision. 5 accounts. 5. All tied to my name. Daniel's personal checking account, linked 4 emergencies. Ashley's boutique business account, co-signed 3 years ago. A revolving credit line for William's home renovations. An auto insurance policy covering 3 vehicles, mine, Daniel's, and Ashley's. And a secondary account I barely remembered opening, quietly bleeding money every month. I felt dizzy. How did I not see this? I whispered. Because they made sure you didn't, Eddie said evenly. He pointed to the screen. Ashley's boutique rent, $1,500 a month, automatically withdrawn for 3 years. That was $54,000 and my throat closed. I scrolled further. Payments covering William's mortgage, twice, when it had nearly defaulted. Mysterious deposits that saved their house. Payments I'd never consciously approved. They've been moving money around like shells in a street game, Eddie said, robbing one account to prop up another. I felt sick. I've been supporting all of them, I said slowly. Haven't I? Yes, Eddie replied, you have. Then he said the words that finally cracked something open inside me. They don't love you, Marissa, they use you. 6 words. Simple, brutal, unavoidable. That night, while the hospital machines hummed and beeped, Eddie and I started cutting cords. Automatic payments, gone. Co-signed access, revoked. Secondary accounts, closed. Each click felt like surgery. Painful, necessary. By morning, my phone was exploding. Daniel's voicemail came first, sharp, accusatory. What kind of game is this? He snapped. Cutting off the accounts? My parents are panicking. You're embarrassing us. Ashley's text followed. My balance is 19. Fix this. No greeting, no concern. William chimed in next. You're destroying everything we built together. Built together. I stared at the words and laughed, a quiet, hollow sound that startled the nurse passing by. Within 48 hours, the Martinez family went into full meltdown. Social media posts appeared, crying videos, vague captions about betrayal and abandonment. Then came the eviction footage. Empty rooms, boxes, Ashley filming while narrating about how everything they worked for had been taken. They blamed the bank. They blamed me. What they didn't admit was the truth. They'd gambled with money that wasn't theirs. They'd relied on support they never earned. And when the flow stopped, everything collapsed. But the real escalation, the moment things crossed from cruel to dangerous, came in an envelope Eddie brought to my room. Printed emails. Legal correspondence. Daniel William, a lawyer. The subject line made my blood run cold. Emergency guardianship. Consultation. Urgent. They were trying to have me declared mentally incompetent, using my heart attack as proof, claiming my irrational financial decisions were evidence I couldn't manage my own life. I felt something inside me harden. This wasn't about family. This was about control, and they were willing to take everything, including my autonomy, to get it back. I didn't cry when I read the emails. That scared me more than anything else. I sat there in my hospital bed, the paper trembling slightly in my hands, while Uncle Eddie watched me with quiet concern. The words blurred together: erratic behavior, diminished capacity, temporary guardianship, legal language dressed up to sound compassionate while aiming straight for my throat. They were going to take my life. Not figuratively, legally. My husband, his parents, the people I'd fed, financed, defended. They were trying to declare me unfit because I stopped paying their bills. I handed the papers back to Eddie and stared at the wall. For the first time since the heart attack, I felt truly alone. Not abandoned. Targeted. That night, after Eddie left, the hospital grew eerily quiet. The hallway lights dimmed. The beeping of machines in nearby rooms slowed into a rhythm that felt too much like a countdown. I lay awake replaying everything. Every apology I'd made when I shouldn't have. Every boundary I'd swallowed to keep the peace. Every time I'd convinced myself love meant endurance. I wondered if I had done this to myself. If being accommodating had taught them I was disposable. If being generous had taught them I was weak. And the darkest thought of all crept in when I stared at the ceiling long enough. If my heart had stopped completely, would they have mourned me or just missed the money? The question lodged itself in my chest and refused to move. The next morning, the nurses commented on how quiet I was, how calm. They thought it meant acceptance. It didn't. It meant shutdown. Daniel called again. This time I answered. Marissa, he said, his voice heavy with manufactured concern, we're worried about you. Your behavior isn't normal. I closed my eyes. What behavior? I asked. Cutting off accounts, refusing to communicate, isolating yourself, he listed. My parents are scared. I'm scared. You weren't scared when I was in the ICU, I said softly. Silence. Then a sigh. That's not fair. I laughed then, a single breath of disbelief. You're right, I said. Fair would have been you showing up. He didn't apologize. Instead, he said, we just want what's best for you. That sentence, so gentle on the surface, was the most dangerous one of all, because it wasn't true. They wanted what was best for them. After the call ended, my hands shook uncontrollably. The monitor reacted immediately, alarms chirping until a nurse rushed in. I told her I was fine. I wasn't. The darkest moment didn't come with screaming or tears. It came with clarity so sharp it hurt. They would never stop. Not out of love, not out of concern. Out of entitlement. That night, I seriously considered giving in. Letting Eddie handle things. Letting them take control. Letting the noise stop. The thought frightened me. Because surrender suddenly felt peaceful. That's how I knew I was at the bottom. When giving up looked like relief. But somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, a quieter voice spoke. If they win, you don't get your life back. You lose it forever. And for the first time, survival wasn't about my heart. It was about my will. The turning point didn't arrive with a dramatic speech or a sudden surge of confidence. It came quietly, deliberate, precise, and irreversible. Uncle Eddie arrived early the next morning, his expression unreadable in that way I'd learned to trust. He set his coffee down, pulled up the chair, and didn't sit right away. They filed the petition yesterday, he said. Guardianship hearing is scheduled for next week. My stomach tightened, but this time I didn't feel the familiar panic. Instead, something settled. What do we do? I asked. Eddie smiled. Not kindly, not reassuringly. It was the smile of someone who had already chosen a direction and burned the bridge behind him. We get ahead of it. He pulled out his tablet and turned it toward me. He had already contacted my lawyer, not Daniel's, not a family referral, but someone who specialized in financial abuse cases tied to medical vulnerability. Someone who understood exactly what this was. Cease and desist letters were being drafted. Emergency account freezes requested. A counterpetition prepared, documenting financial exploitation. They think you're weak because you're recovering, Eddie said calmly. They're wrong. You're protected. For the first time since my collapse, my chest felt lighter. Not healed. Empowered. That afternoon, my lawyer visited in person. She spoke plainly, efficiently, without sugarcoating anything. What they attempted is serious, she said. Using a medical event to claim diminished capacity, especially when the financial decisions were protective, is not concern. It's coercion. Hearing someone name it out loud mattered. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't unstable. I was being targeted. The final piece fell into place later that evening. A nurse, one I hadn't seen before, entered my room to deliver medication. As she checked my chart, she paused. Your husband hasn't visited, she said carefully. That's unusual. I met her eyes. No, I said, it's consistent. She hesitated, then added quietly, I saw him yesterday, downstairs. My heart skipped. He was asking about financial paperwork, she continued. Billing, access forms. He seemed frustrated. That was it. The last illusion snapped. This had never been about my health. It had been about control from the moment my heart failed. When the nurse left, I stared out the window at the city lights and felt something unfamiliar rise in me. Not anger, not grief. Resolve. That night, I signed everything. Every document that severed shared access. Every form that restored my autonomy. Every instruction that made it legally impossible for them to touch my life again. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. Because I finally understood something that changed everything. People who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries cruelty. The next morning, the legal filings went through. By noon, Daniel's guardianship petition was dismissed. By evening, restraining language was added to the no-contact order. And somewhere, far away from my hospital room, a family that had built their lifestyle on my compliance realized, too late, that the power they thought they had was gone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. And for the first time since my heart attack, I wasn't just surviving. I was choosing myself. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It unraveled. Slowly, publicly, irreversibly. Once the guardianship petition was dismissed, the narrative Daniel's family had been pushing began to collapse under its own weight. What they'd counted on, silence, confusion, my weakness, was gone. The first crack appeared online. Ashley had posted a tearful video from her car, mascara streaked, voice trembling just enough to feel rehearsed. The caption spoke about loving someone through mental health struggles and standing by family when they push you away. It was vague, manipulative, carefully worded. Within hours, the comments filled with sympathy. Until someone posted a screenshot. It was the picnic photo, the one from Crystal Lake, the timestamp visible. The caption beneath the screenshot was simple. This was posted while she was hospitalized after a heart attack. That was all it took. People started asking questions, connecting dates, pointing out inconsistencies. Ashley deleted the post, then reposted, then turned off comments entirely. Too late. The screenshots spread faster than any explanation could keep up with. Sponsors quietly disappeared from Ashley's boutique page. Her girl boss image cracked when people realized who had really been funding it. Orders were canceled. Partnerships paused. The business she'd built on borrowed money and borrowed credibility collapsed in weeks. Daniel wasn't spared. Someone forwarded the thread to his company's HR department. Not maliciously, just enough to raise concerns about ethics, financial entanglements, and public conduct. He was placed on administrative review pending investigation. He called me. I didn't answer. William tried next. Emails this time. Long ones. Rambling. Defensive. Filled with phrases like misunderstanding and family matters should stay private. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so familiar. The same people who had tried to drag me into court now begged for discretion. Meanwhile, the bank moved forward with foreclosure. The house, already empty, already filmed for pity, was gone. The family scattered, staying with relatives, couch surfing through the very network they'd once lorded over. And me? I watched it all from a distance. Not with satisfaction, with calm. When I was discharged from St. Mary's Hospital, Uncle Eddie was waiting in the parking lot with his old Toyota. No balloons, no speeches, just a nod and a hand reaching for my bag. Ready? He asked. I was. We drove past the city, past the neighborhood where Daniel and I had lived our carefully curated life. I didn't look back. The cabin Eddie had arranged wasn't luxurious. It was honest, solid, built for use, not appearances. The kind of place that didn't ask anything of you except to exist within it. That first night, I cooked a simple meal and ate it in silence. No notifications, no demands, no guilt. I slept deeper than I had in years. 6 months passed. I built a life around peace instead of obligation. A remote job, slow mornings, boundaries enforced without explanation. The no-contact order held, though they tested it, through relatives, through cards, through concerned messages from people I barely knew. I ignored them all. Because here's what I learned. When you stop being useful to people who only value utility, they will call you cruel. But cruelty is not refusing to be exploited. Cruelty is watching someone collapse and choosing a picnic instead. And I was done confusing the two. 6 months after my heart attack, I finally understood what peace felt like. Not happiness, not triumph, peace. It arrived quietly, in the absence of constant urgency, in mornings where my phone stayed silent, in evenings where no one needed fixing, funding, or forgiving. I woke when my body was ready. I worked without the weight of other people's emergencies pressing into my spine. I ate meals without guilt, slept without bracing myself for the next demand. Daniel tried once more. A message slipped through via his therapist, suggesting closure might help us both heal. That he'd grown, that he understood now, that love deserved one final conversation. I declined, not because I was angry, because I was done negotiating my worth. I had already found my closure, in the mountains, in my breath coming easier, in the knowledge that love does not require self-erasure. Here's the truth. I wish someone had told me sooner. If people only love you when you are useful, they do not love you. They love the access. They love the convenience. They love the version of you that costs them nothing and gives them everything. The moment I stopped being that person, their masks fell. Not all at once, but enough for me to see clearly. My heart didn't fail me. It saved me. It forced me to stop running toward people who never ran back. It made me sit still long enough to recognize exploitation dressed up as family, and it gave me the chance, maybe my only chance, to choose myself without apology. I don't know what Daniel tells people now. I don't care. I have the truth, and the truth gave me something far more valuable than being loved by the wrong people. It gave me my life back, and that finally was enough.